Good evening and welcome to your Sunday session with This is Ibrox. Tonight, for the first time in what seems an eternity, I will be your host, Kyran Wallace. We'll be taking a deep dive into this summer's rebuild as we look ahead to who stays and who goes of the current Rangers squad. As ever, we're live on YouTube, so please get involved in the comments and take part in who you think should stick around and be on their way out of the team coming into the next season. Anyway, we'll move on. It would be mad of me to try and carve this out myself tonight, and I'm joined by two fantastic guests. If This is Ibrox were to have a summer rebuild, these two would be the first out the door. I'm just kidding, guys. I'm joined by Tommy and Craig. Craig, how are you, mate?
I'm good, thank you. All the better after that intro. And I thought you were bigging us up there, and then you just cut us off at the knees. So no, I'm all good, Kieran. Look forward to chatting about some of the controversial players I think that'll be involved in this one. I think Cyril Dessers might be one that gets a bit of airtime tonight.
I feel like every time I've been on this podcast, I've just spoke about Cyril Dessers and done him to death, and I'd gladly see him go, but we'll get to that. Anyway, Tommy, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Likewise, I enjoyed that intro there. I suppose it's less being let go and more of, if This is Ibrox can match my fee, then I will return for another season. I need to be promised that I'm a starter.
I think we're in for a bit of a roller coaster. I can't believe you've let me take the reins here. For anyone wondering why I'm hosting, the guys had prior engagements that have now been postponed to a later date, but we stuck with the original plan, and I think Tommy's off. He said that he's let me do this. You remember that episode of Father Ted? I think it was a Christmas special where Dougal takes the funeral and the hearse is upside down on fire. Like, this is kind of how this could go.
It's the podcast equivalent of kids being allowed to bring their board games in at the last day of school. It's essentially what this is. Right? But we're big believers in having a pathway and letting the juniors get into the first team at some point as well, Kieran. So there you go.
I've been in your shadow for far too long. It's my turn to break through here. Anyway, I was just saying off air there, this is actually the first time myself and Tommy have been on together. So I'll come to you first, Tommy. I'll let you finish your tea, right?
Yeah, well, Rangers have a drink candy when I'm on the podcast.
This week, there's not been any football to report on. Of course, it's a close season. But with Rangers, it never rains at polls when it comes to news. So we've already seen the announcement yesterday that Ryan Jack, Borna Barisic, John McLaughlin, Kermar, Roofe and John Lundstram will depart this summer and their contracts won't be extended. Now, we're not really going to touch on that too much. There's no real surprises there. It's more or less what we expected, aside from Leon Balogun having his contract extended. But Tommy, something that was completely out of the blue and as a surprise was our CEO, James Bisgrove, departing the club for pastures new in Saudi. Is this something that took you as surprised as it did me?
I think surprised in terms of, he was committed to the project. I'm not a big fan of that terminology, right? But he'd done a reasonably good job. Now, I know people across the board will take a position, much like players, they'll take a position on board members and chief execs, etc. But he had managed to uplift some things. Didn't get everything right. I'm not kind of saying that he absolutely did. But the offer that was put in front of him from Saudi in terms of money, etc., and the opportunity, it's too big to turn down. And so, yeah, a surprise for the club. And you can tell that by the fact that there was an interim structure put in, because if you've got a succession plan, then somebody slides right into that position, and you don't want to be losing your chief executives just as you go into another rebuild, because that seems like a Rangers kind of summer thing these days. Oh, we'll do another rebuild every kind of season. So yeah, by surprise, not perfect for the reason I've just outlined there, but we've got enough people round about the club and the football structure, people like the manager, Niels Koppen, etc., that most importantly, the wheels will keep turning when it comes to recruitment. And then you've still got, from a kind of commercial perspective, Karim Varane is already in there, as well as the commercial director. So, yeah, whilst the club looks to see who the best person is to fill in the chief executive role.
Craig, going on what Tommy said there, touching on the timing of it, given that we are going through such a rebuild and where we are as a club, it's just not the greatest of timing. Where do you kind of stand with this, and where can you see things going from here?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's hard as a fan to be able to work out from the ins and outs of whether it is a good or a bad thing. We've seen what he did commercially, and his sort of more commercial focused role when he arrived to the club, and the number of sponsors and partners that the club now has is significantly more than it was at beforehand, and that's much needed in a modern day club. It's much needed in a club of our size, and it's much needed in a club that needs to continue to build revenue in a league, I guess, that doesn't naturally bring it. So I think he did exceptionally well in that, and that was why the chief exec role was maybe a wee bit surprised when he got it, but it did seem like a natural. Tommy spoke about the pathways earlier in the podcast. It seemed like a natural progression for him to move into that. Whether he's had the impact that he really wanted or that we really wanted from him, I think is questionable. We know that he brought in sort of the fan forum side of things to try and improve communication from the club. We thought that was going to be the start of it, but it turned out that was a full plan, and that doesn't really work. And we've seen, especially when it's not necessarily the best time for the club, fans want more and more communication from those at the top, and that just hasn't been forthcoming. And James Bisgrove would have been in control of a lot of that, I imagine, and driving a lot of that. Not necessarily because it's his day-to-day job, but because that's something that interests him, and his reputation as chief exec is something that he obviously wants to be in control of, and how the fans view him, etc. So he does get opportunities like this one in Saudi Arabia. I'm not surprised that he took it. I think any of us would really consider a job that if it paid as much money as he's going to get for that club. I guess it's the opportunity to build something pretty much from scratch as well. So you can see the benefits for him. I think the disappointment potentially comes from it being, it seems almost, and I don't imagine it will have been the first opportunity that came up for him, but it almost comes across that way publicly. So I think that was really what it was like. I mean, CGM 55 in the comments, Bisgrove was always leaving first chance he got. He's done it throughout his career. RFC 72, Bisgrove was good commercially. CEO when he did better and more experience, not a cheap in-house promotion. And then we've got Paul McGregor here now. James Bisgrove was gone with compensation. I wonder if some of this to manager for rebuild. I'm not really sure. I've not seen much on the compensation side of things. I don't know if anyone else has. Can't imagine it'll be a great deal for our chief exec. Definitely not of anything from a player perspective. But it'll be interesting to see where this goes next, who the next one is. We've got the interim structure in place. The main thing is it doesn't impact the summer activity, because we know how big that is for us and for the club for going forward.
Yeah, what I'm led to believe with the compensation is that Rangers are after a 6-figure fee. So I don't think it's anything that would benefit the transfer budget greatly. But in terms of James Bisgrove himself and his role at the club and what he'd done, commercially turned the club round to almost an elite level for where we are in Scotland. I think you touched on it, Craig. We went from, I think it was 10 partners to 44. And I think the last books reported a turnover of something like 33 million in revenue from not just the retail and commercial side of things. So very successful on that side. In his short time as CEO, there was mistakes made, but also we can credit him with bringing in Philippe Clement. I think that may be the sort of legacy that's left, I hope, if Clement goes on to be a successful manager. But we've now got to look at what we've got here right now, and I'll start with you, Tommy. We're going to look at the rebuild here. Here we are again, same time this year, same as last summer. Wee bit depressing, and I've spoke about it in our group chat about that saying and that quote from Gerrard when we won 55. Let's fix the roof while the sun's shining. It's almost like we've done the complete opposite, and here we are again. So for us guys, we are the board for tonight, and it's up to us to discuss who stays and who goes. And I'm going to start with the most controversial one of the lot of them, and it's Rangers Hall of Famer, club captain James Tavernier. Tommy, does he stay or does he go for you?
Well, the caveat to this is all, it depends on the offer, right?
Yes.
Because everybody could go depending on what number gets faxed in. I'm showing my age, they're talking about faxes. I don't know if the email or something like that these days will send a carrier pigeon, but I personally think James Tavernier stays for another year. It's a controversial shout, and I know that people will say, well, he's slowing down. It's evidently catching up with him now. I think he's played, innumerable amount of games, and his consistency of being able to turn up to work, so to speak, has been phenomenal. But I go back to what I said on a previous pod, which was, is he the absolute killer problem, or do we have bigger problems that we need to spend our budget in? So I don't think, and I don't think there'll be a massive rush of people to buy James Tavernier either. I think if that was going to happen, it would have happened 3 years ago. Give or take. So yeah, I think James Tavernier's still in a blue jersey come next season.
When you say that, though, do you mean he's in a blue jersey playing week in, week out, the way he is just now, in his 30s? Kind of looks like towards the end of this season, he's looked tired. He's lost a yard, especially coming up against Maid at Celtic. That just seems to be the one that sticks out like a sore thumb to everyone. Could you see him in more of a reduced role? We've seen the emergence of Dujon Sterling, who could possibly compete for that right back position.
Possibly compete for it, but Dujon Sterling's not going to put the same numbers on the board, and that's the main conversation that we're having here. So if you don't like James Tavernier because you think his legs have gone, or you don't like James Tavernier because he can be slightly suspect on some games, or you don't like James Tavernier because he has a real tough time with Dyson Maida or whatever, right? Fine, they're all legitimate things to say. Replacing Dujon Sterling doesn't naturally, solve all those problems. He'll have his own kind of tough games as well, and he's not going to give you anywhere near the same attacking threat. And when I say attacking threat, I'm not just falling into the kind of lazy argument of, but he's good going forward and we play through him, right? Because we need to mix up how we play actually. But the numbers that he puts on board translate into winning games, drawing games, points on the board, keeping you in title races, winning you titles. Don't forget he scored the winner in the cup final that we actually won this season. You know what I mean? So that's the conversation you have to have with James Tavernier. Yes, you look at both sides of the ledger. What do you take out to Dujon Sterling, to your point? What does he add in at the front end? Or are you going to go and buy somebody else who's going to do that? I keep coming back to, is James Tavernier the absolute serious problem in the squad right now? Now, there'll be other people out there that will say it's the armband. I'm not sure I believe that. Or he's slowing down and you're not going to get the same numbers again. Again, they're all legitimate conversations. But I think if you come to start next season, you say James Tavernier's your starting right back, but there is somebody who's identified as a successor and they get minutes next season, that's probably a relatively comfortable place. And then you see James Tavernier not being in the 25-26 season. I think that's probably more of a legitimate point, unless somebody rocks out of the Middle East with a large check and says, we really, really want James Tavernier, here's substantial money, in which case he's sold.
Yeah, I know a new CEO over there who's just joined a newly promoted club with a hell of a lot of money that maybe does a turn there. But Craig, Tommy's of the side there that he should remain here for at least another year. Given a lot of pros there, what he gives is an output, assists and goals. That's 4 seasons in a row. Goal contributions have been in the mid-20s. That's a lot to take out a team for a player to go. But the sort of how much you would spend to replace that would be a hell of a lot of money, and a hell of a lot of money we've probably not got. So it would take a bit of a chunky transfer fee, I feel. Are you on the same boat as this? Does he remain at Rangers next season, or would you be of the opinion that we need a fresh start there?
It's one I've been back and forward on as the season's come to the end, I think. I've seen the positives of him staying. You've outlined them there in terms of the contributions that he makes. Definitely think in the last 5 or 10 games of the season, his form kind of dropped off a cliff a little bit. I don't know how much of that we've seen people talking about. Was that down to just the sheer number of games that he's played for Rangers over the course of his career with us so far? Was that down to tiredness? Was it down to actually how the team was set up? Was it down to how everyone else was playing? So he kind of just fell into that trap a little bit as well. We don't know the answers to these ones. I think if any sort of half decent offer comes for James Tavernier, you accept it. I'm not sure many fans maybe many fans is the wrong thing. I think he'll be pretty split on Rangers fans as to whether if James Tavernier were still here next year, whether they wanted him to start or not. I think Tommy says, is that the main issue in the team? No, but it's a big issue for fans, I think, because James Tavernier, Connor Goldson, John Lundstram, these are guys that have been around for a number of years now, and we've seen consistent failings in the same moments in seasons, and in the same places as well, like especially against Celtic at Celtic Park, and cup finals, etc. So we've seen the sort of pattern of issues coming from these guys, and I think that's part of what's frustrating a lot of Rangers fans, and where Rangers fans feel that almost you just need to get rid of them to get rid of that mentality that they view it as, or get rid of that of that consistent underperforming on those big stages where we need Rangers players and the leadership group as such to sort of come forward and perform. Tommy, I can see you.
Well, it's an interesting side of the conversation, right? So I get all that, and again, if James Tavernier was to leave, I wouldn't be naturally heartbroken or anything like that. Don't get me wrong, right? But if you look at Steven Gerrard all the way through, these managers have all consistently looked at James Tavernier on the pitch and behind and said, yeah, captain material, right? I think, to your point, what drives a lot of people a little bit, gets frustrated, is you're looking at it and you're going, right, does he set the standards, or has he presided over failures, and does that wash into the rest of the team? You know, talking about the infamous, we don't like being challenged in the game notes and stuff like that in the match programs. But consistently these managers have looked at him and said, yeah, that's the right fit. Now maybe that's been a problem, but also it links into Philippe Clement's comments with regards to Leon Balogun. To the players that you've just said there, they've been there for a while, they've all been shipped out. There's going to be new players coming in. There's got to be some level of continuity from a senior perspective in that squad. Now, do people want James Tavernier to be part of that continuity of new players coming in and being told what the standards are at Rangers? I think that's a really interesting one, because, yeah, he's presided over more failures than wins. Now, there's lots of different avenues to that conversation, but it seems to me that, given the Balogun comments, that Philippe Clement wants a slight core of senior players retained there to help bed in the new ones. And I would suggest that James Tavernier is going to be part of that.
Yeah, Kyran, I'm going to run through some comments just now, because there's hundreds of comments coming in. Thank you very much to everyone for putting them in. But I'll finish on one that I'm keen to, I guess, open up to you both. But Ian McPhee says, Tav and Goldson are part of the old guard. We must completely clear out and get fresh young winners in. CGM 55, Tav should go. I don't care what the offer is. A carrot and a chocolate penguin will do me. Hugo Bear, no one is buying Tav. Stevie Scotty put it this way: if we start the new season with Tav and Goldson as starters, we'll end up second best again next year. I think that's part of kind of what I was trying to put forward, as kind of a common theme, common thought process that's coming through.
So just on that one, I do get the frustration with the perception of it. Again, I'm not making a case one way or the other. I do understand the majority of fans looking at it going, do you know what, the likes of Tav and Goldson have presided over a lot of failures. We should definitely have won more trophies. And now it's time just to be really, really brutally ruthless and cut them out. Again, all of that comes with a price as well to it. And it's an interest in how many of your senior team do you get rid of.
100%. And on that as well, I think the people that are screaming for Tav, Goldson, Lundstram, you've already got rid of Lundstram here, right? So 3/4 of your leadership team, in a way, the same people that are screaming for this will be the same people that are screaming from the rooftops next season, when we have completely cleaned the boards of everybody and brought a full new squad in, and it's taken so much longer for everybody to gel. We're going to have a tough start to the season, Champions League qualifiers, our first Old Firm games away to Celtic as well, so right away the pressure's on Philippe Clement. So you put yourself in Philippe Clement's shoes, and you're saying, right, I've got a leadership group here of 4 players. The support want 3 of the 4 of them gone. They never want to see them in a Rangers jersey again. Is this going to bode well for me? I think I'm on the side of it probably won't work out the way that the fans want, and what the fans want and what the fans get doesn't always seem to be the same thing. And I think in this case that it can't. Given our financial situation, that we can't go out and just splash cash on everybody and replace everybody. So in terms of James Tavernier, I'm very much of the opinion I'd like to see a fresh start in the backline, a younger backline, more to the point I've already touched on Sterling. So for me, I'd maybe say it's time to move on for James Tavernier, or I would be saying it's maybe time to reinvent, in the sense that we've seen it with older players around sort of higher levels, that could he play in a central midfield role that we've seen in previous seasons a while back? Or is that square pegs and round holes? I'm not so sure.
It feels very much like square pegs and round holes.
Either
could we see him in a reduced role that's protecting the legs a wee bit more, given his age, given the miles on the clock, because he's played a hell of a lot of games for Rangers, and that's all credit to himself. He's been fit. And another sort of caveat that comes with it is something we've really struggled with this season is players being fit and playing consistently week in, week out. That's not something you can tag on to James Tavernier and Connor Goldson to an extent towards the end of the season. And well, we're on Connor Goldson, and we've spoken
Kieran, just to jump in, just a final point on James Tavernier, because I think it's a key part to when we look at the rest of the squad. Is this comment from Ian McCutcheon. He says, forget Tav's goals, they must be replaced by decent forwards and midfield players. I think you could argue pretty comprehensively that James Tavernier's goals have covered over the cracks for a lot of other areas of the squad where we should be delivering goals. And I think that's one of the key things, that if we are rebuilding the squad, then the aim has to be, or you have to hope that the players we are picking are ones that will contribute goals from across the team, and then those additional goals. And I know it's scary taking out that number of goals and assists from one player. Like, I think it's a lot to make up, and it's a big step to take. But if we're bringing in these new players that are expected to be of the level that we want them to be, then we're going to need them to be the ones delivering the goals and delivering the assist further up the park.
But they're not mutually. Sorry, guys, they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, you could have new strikers scoring goals, attacking midfielders scoring goals, and your right back scoring goals. I don't think it naturally has to be one or the other. And again, I'm not defending it one way or the other. Like I said previously, if James Tavernier was to leave, as long as it's the right fee, fine. To your point, Kieran, a moment ago, that's essentially what I see in my mind. And I know, from a contractual perspective, you're in danger of losing him for nothing at a certain point in time as well, right? But he's 32, right? So he's got one move left in him, or maybe another season or two, and then it really starts to tail off. Part of that transition point is exactly what I mean. Is he the key problem, or do you bring in somebody and they pair in with him over the course of the next season, and then they take the jersey? If you're not doing that, what you're going to have to do is either get rid of him or buy a serious starter, because James Tavernier is your captain and he's been your starting right back for a number of years. If you say somebody's coming in, it has to be a conversation of, right, you need to leave. I don't think he's at the place whereby he would probably want to accept, right, you're just going to sit on the bench, there's somebody new in town. I think he would then fashion a move to wherever he could as well. So, yeah, I think I don't think he'd throw his toys out the plan or anything like that. I don't hear that about him, but it has to be that level. If you're bringing somebody in, it's either one of two things: an up-and-coming, let's play and learn from James Tavernier, or it's an absolute fundamental starter and you're going out the door. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't think
wholeheartedly agree there. I think it will be one way or the other. We'll find out soon enough. I do believe he'll be there next season. Whether or not I agree with that, I'm not so sure. But another guy that kind of fits that bracket, I touched on it a moment ago, is Connor Goldson. Just before I get there, and just a big thank you to everybody that's tuning in live on YouTube at the moment. Moving on to Connor Goldson, as we did Tavernier, tell us in the comments, would you like to see Goldson here next season? Yes or no? And try and back it up with your reasoning. Craig, Connor Goldson, he is our fastest player to 300 games. Found himself dropped to the bench towards the tail end of the season, and unfortunately found himself with, I think it was a damaged medial ligament in his knee, which will see him out until at least pre-season. Looking ahead to next season, Goldson's one of the top earners at the club, current vice-captain. Where do you see his future at Rangers? Do you see him being here come the start of pre-season?
It does seem quite convenient, actually, that Connor Goldson gets injured as soon as he gets dropped from the first team. But that's total tin hat scenario there, but it does seem very convenient that the first time he was dropped was he just happens to get an injury. But I like Connor Goldson. I get a lot of stick on here for defending Connor Goldson, probably too much. In some circumstances, I do really like him. My concern is that he disrupts the balance of our defence. I think just in terms of the makeup of who the other central defenders are, John Souttar being moved out to the left-hand side of the central defensive partnership because Connor Goldson just has that right-hand side nailed down. I think that's really affected John Souttar in a lot of ways this season. And I think it's affected the balance of our team as well. We saw, I think even in the last few games when Ben Davies was there, having a left-footed player on that side that can naturally pass and naturally play out from the back. In that way, we just seemed more balanced and even defending various ways. But so Connor Goldson, I would sell Connor Goldson as well if there's interest. The concern is same with James Tavernier. I don't think there's any interest unless it come from Saudi Arabia. With where we've obviously seen rumours. I think Connor Goldson would have been away last summer had there been interest in him, and he's obviously another year older. He's got this injury. What impact does actually that injury have on his ability to go and do a good pre-season with another club? And I think that's where the question marks are. I really like Connor Goldson. I think he's been a really good player for us. I think this season just seemed to be a step too far. Same with James Tavernier. Towards the end, I think it just seemed a step too far. So I would sell Connor Goldson, and I think you've got a natural replacement leader there, and John Souttar, who can step into not just that exact position, but that sort of leadership. He was the captain at Hearts beforehand. He's been in that role at a decent sized club in Scotland, so I'm more than confident that he could come in and do that with hopefully a new centre half beside him.
I think I'm in the same boat with you with the John Souttar thing. If Goldson was to move on, I'd be quite happy with John Souttar in that right centre-back position. Now, it's of no coincidence that the bulk of the transfer rumours that have come about have been Cordoba, and the Cordoba being a left centre-back, and someone help me out here with the pronunciation of the Chilean left centre-back / left-back that we're interested in.
You've put me on the spot there, and I've been at a wedding all weekend, so I'm struggling there. So I know who you're talking about.
I'm sure somebody will help us out in the comments.
These things are always for the host to take first crack at the pronunciation, Kyran. That's exactly how it works.
Tommy, come on, you can't be getting my dressing down on air here.
Not at all.
Listen,
absolutely not at all.
I'm ad-libbing here now. It's your turn, mate. Connor Goldson, where do you stand here? You've already said with James Tavernier, you could see him sticking around for another year. Are you on the same boat with Connor Goldson in that sense?
To a large extent, yeah. I mean, I think out the two of them, I'd probably, if you were asking me that question, which one goes, I'd probably prefer to see Connor Goldson go. I mean, he's 31 or whatever, and I think mistakes were creeping into his game. He's still a good defender. I know we tend to speak, particularly Rangers fans, in very binary terms. Somebody's really, really bad or somebody's really, really good, right? Connor Goldson's a decent defender in there, right? And I don't think you'd have any problem being part of that squad and stuff like that as well. But again, he's probably a player that expects to be a starter. And do I think we need to uplift that he was making is probably the concern for me. And I don't want to duplicate what other people have said here in the pod and in the chat and stuff like that as well. But the injury is probably the concern, because he is facing into a bit of a rocky kind of pre-season. When you start to get into that over 30 camp and you're getting injuries and stuff like that, people start to worry. I don't think there's anybody, in Europe generally who would take a chance on him at this point in time. Anybody decent, I should say, at a decent level. I don't think he's naturally going down south or anything like that. I think again it would be a Middle Eastern job. And there, as you say, there's a reason why we're being linked with centre backs, because we need to uplift. We need to uplift the entire back four. We all know that. It's just a case of where we are. And you're right, Billy. I try and be a good defender of our players at the same time, but I'm not blinkered. I do know that they have serious problems, and that's why we're in the state we are, and that's why we only won the League Cup and blew the chance at the title that we'd fashioned for ourselves and absolutely ruined that chance because we bottled it. So don't mistake me of just being a happy clapper for the squad in any way, shape or form. And so, yeah, I would see Connor Goldson out the door if another offer came in.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree there on the Goldson thing. I think we're very much all on the same wavelength that he is of the age that Father Time catches up with everyone. The knee injury is going to have a bearing on him. It's not going to be like he comes back in and he's as sharp as attack, and that's going to take time as well. And at the age that he is, that it may well take time, and we may well look at John Souttar being the starter at right centre back. And before we move on to sort of our next group of players, Ben Davies is one. He's came in at the end of the season. I think he's actually done well, but over the piece at Rangers, and we talk about players who consume a huge wage but don't contribute anywhere near as much of it. Ben Davies seems to be one of these players who is not really featured anywhere near as much as he should, considering the fee that we paid and considering the wages that he's on. In terms of Davies, is this one that's universally across the board, Tommy, that he should be out the door? We should be moving him on and reinvesting that wage somewhere else?
No, I don't see anything wrong with Davies. I think he was slightly hampered by a bit of unfair press, in terms of him being a terrible defender. He's not a terrible defender. He's a pretty decent player, actually. Yeah, he made a big mistake, Old Firm game, stuff like that as well. He came in, as with any player, you need a bit of a run of games to kind of show where you are and stuff like that as well. And also, if you're getting rid of, people like Goldson and stuff like that as well, you go, well, Ben Davies, the wages in there, it's acceptable. He's more than able to either try and stake a claim or be round about the squad to come off the bench and fit in if there's injuries and stuff like that. So if you're looking at it as a squad game, which it absolutely is, then you go, well, what's wrong with Ben Davies keeping a hold of, a slot in the squad and being able to step in? I think that's absolutely, especially if you're getting rid of people like Goldson, I think that's a natural kind of one that answers itself. He's quiet, doesn't cause any trouble, comes in, does a job, starting to show what he's about, can definitely play with John Souttar, etc. I wouldn't have any problem with Ben Davies still being part of Rangers squad next season.
Yeah, and Craig, kind of going off the back of what Tommy said there, and I'm slightly surprised at how heavily you've backed him, given that, again, this season it goes back to players being available consistently. I don't think that can be said for Ben Davies. Craig, are you in the camp that he should stay?
Good question. I hadn't really thought about Ben Davies. I like Ben Davies as a player. I think he provided a good balance to our team in terms of offering that left foot. I don't think he's done much wrong apart from that game at Parkhead. I don't think he's done a great deal wrong in his time at Rangers. It seemed like he'd been bombed out for much of the season, and then he just reappeared with a few games to go. It kind of suggests that Philippe Clement doesn't fancy him. He's on a pretty high wage. I think I would probably, if I had the choice and money wasn't a factor in any way, I'd probably keep him as my backup left centre half, and then just have him on a sort of rotational basis. I think he's good enough to play in the league and to be a backup in that way. I'm not entirely convinced he should be a starter. We just saved $100,000 plus per week in wages with the players we've let go. It's a toss of the coin, that one. I'd probably say Ben Davies will probably want to go because of the lack of game time he's had, so I would let him go. But if he was to stay, I wouldn't. I think I'd be more up in arms about other players staying than I would for Ben Davies.
No problem. And how's it looking in the comments? Is people for him or against him? How are we looking?
Pretty much against them. I think I'm just looking for some here. Davies needs moved
on. I was talking about Davies on media, to be honest with you. I'm definitely getting checked out, judging by the comments. Whilst you're pulling into comments and stuff like that as well, just be clear, it's not about just keeping people, right? All the people we've mentioned, Tav, Goldson, Davies, you would be able to get rid of them all. I'm not saying that they need to be kept. I'm saying you need to take a relatively proportional view of this stuff, right? As you try and clear out an entire squad, you need to try and say, right, where's the biggest risks or can I keep people? I'm the same as Craig there. If somebody comes in with a decent offer or Ben Davies starts making noise, you go, right, get him out. Or indeed, if you can bring in somebody that's better. Everybody's subject to the law of we've found somebody better. It's that simple. And again, we don't need to always talk in binary terms. You can say I can live with them being in the squad, but I could also live with them, being sold. It's a perfectly legitimate place to have both points of view at the same time. We just need to be calm about this type of thing.
I'm very much with you here in the reality of having a clear out, but having a rebuild at the same time with having to work with a budget. Now, that's quite a difficult thing, given the here and now of where we are at Rangers. But we'll move on. And thanks to everyone for their comments so far. Keep them coming. Interaction's been excellent. And just before we move to the next group of players, for anyone watching online just now, over on our Twitter, if you're of the older age, or X, if you're of anyone younger than me, we've currently got a competition on where you could win the new Rangers away top, which was released on Monday there. This actually gets drawn tomorrow. So if you're going to do it, head over to @ThisIsIbrox right now, like and retweet that tweet, and subscribe to us. I think, if I'm pointing wrong direction, down this corner here. Subscribe to us, guys.
And do you know what, right? Sorry, do you know what as well? See, when I do the draw, before I send the top out, I'm putting Tav or Goldson's name on the back of it, right? And whoever wins it is getting that, or Ben Davies. I might put all three of their names on it, right? And that's it. Stop whoever wins it. Simple as that, right? There you go.
Tommy did actually say off air that he was going to put his bank details in the comments too. So if anybody wants to bung him 40 quid, he'll won't put Tav's name on the back, but you'll still win the shirt. Anyway, guys, we digress. We move on, and probably one of the more controversial figures that splits a lot of opinion this year, Craig, Todd Cantwell. He undoubtedly has the ability to be one of the best players in the squad. I have said this at the start of last season, and seen it clipped up by that side and going around Twitter there again and again and again, and I don't really care, to be honest, what they think. But I did say at the time that I felt the squad should be built around Todd Cantwell. I said I felt he was one of the best players in the league and the best player at Rangers at the time. My views slightly skewed at the moment, given all the sort of off-field stuff that's happened with the social media, and that he's probably not been the flavour of the month with Philip Clement. It's been a bit of a hot and cold relationship. Where do you stand in Todd Cantwell? Would you move him on, or would you keep him around?
I probably should have done some prep for this podcast in terms of who I thought should stay or go, but it's one of those ones.
Right. I'm the host tonight. You've just handed the reins over and put the feet up, mate. Don't worry about it.
The season's finished, right? They've got their feet up. They're thinking about their holidays, flip-flops, social media, and all that type of stuff, and not putting the hard yards in. Right? You're all getting taken to Gull Sands for pre-season of the This Is Ibrox, right?
And that's just Todd Cantwell, no Craig.
I think the issue with a lot of these players, though, is that if they stayed, I wouldn't have too much of an issue, but there would need to be a lot of change elsewhere. I think individually, it's probably quite hard to say, well, that person should stay or that person should go, because it probably depends on what else is happening in the squad. I think it's probably easier to open up this conversation to go, well, you've got Todd Cantwell, you've got Lawrence in there, you've got a few other players that could potentially play in there as well, and it's like, well, who out of that group would you want to keep? I think Todd Cantwell is probably top of that list for that group. I think Tom Lawrence, I would quite happily say thank you very much and see you later. This summer, I don't think he's offered anywhere near enough or what we expected him to when he first came in. We saw what he was as a player for Derby and places like that, and he's just not lived up to that expectation. Also injured so often that I think it just has to go. Todd Cantwell doesn't have that issue. I guess the frustration from fans comes from different areas with him, and it tends to be the social media side of things. He's probably been a bit unfortunate in terms of he's been moved about that forward line and back into the midfield as well this season, so he's not had a consistent role. I felt the last 4 or 5 games he probably came into his own a bit more. I think he was in his natural position. He looked as though he was in better form. He was scoring some goals, with some cracking assists in there as well, and he was taking control of games. I think that's what leaving him out the team and not bringing him on at Celtic Park just is such a confusing decision from Philippe Clement, because Todd Cantwell, when he's on his game and in form, is really important player for Rangers. When he's not on his game or he's off form, or he's getting too caught up in other things happening on the park, that's when you start to go, well, is this the Todd Cantwell we really need as part of the team? I think Todd Cantwell has the quality going forward that we should keep him. I think if he has a good season or two, he can make you some money. So I would definitely keep him. I think if you've got the right players around him, he can make a real difference.
Yeah, I share your view there, Craig and Tommy. Something that Craig mentioned on there, keep him around. Hopefully his performances pick up, we make a bit of money. Is it important that Todd Cantwell stays at Rangers, that we're not selling him at that sort of floor value, that we're trying to maximise what we can get for him, or would you see him going at a fraction of the cost?
No, listen, you need to maximise as much value as possible. I don't think this one just goes out M55, by the way, so I'd probably keep him. Right, just for you there, CGM. Right, I'm determined to keep all the players. Now that you've said that in the comments, right? But yeah, I'm with Craig. I don't think he's the biggest concern. I think there's ability in there. We've definitely not seen it consistently, and we've not seen. I don't think we've seen his best. It's probably the thing, right? I think there's more to come from Todd Cantwell, and if he does have better players round about them, and he gets absolutely, a season in his best position and stuff like that. Because remember, he was playing out right. He was being asked to do different things. That's not an excuse. Sometimes he's not affected the games the way that we would expect a main player to do. But yeah, I don't see any need to rush him out the door or anything like that. He gets a chance to try and come in and show us his very, very best form and engineer maybe a higher transfer fee as well. But I'd definitely want to retain his squad, please.
Okay, and sort of just off of that, like of that group of number 10s, I would group him in with Tom Lawrence, Kieran Dowell, Yanis Hadji. Are you of the opinion that Dowell stays, Lawrence and Hadji move on, given that Lawrence and Hadji both will have a year left in their deal come the start of the season? Is it important that we get fees in for these guys rather than seeing them walking out the door for nothing?
Is that to me or Tommy? Sorry, Kieran.
Tommy, well, we're on that, buddy.
Get back in your place, Craig. I'm going to go first, right?
I'll give you time to prepare, Craig.
He's away scribbling his notes here. No, I think if there's a place that, and people could argue with me, and it'd be interesting to hear people's thoughts in the comments as well, right? But obviously, if you chop the team up into 3 separate pieces, because the goalkeeper looks after itself, right? And you say defence, midfield, forward line, I actually think our real surgery needs to happen in the midfield. I know people point to Dessers and Lammers, not, but I mean the real surgery, right? And we've got Diomandi in there, and you get a question mark over Raskin, but I think he'll definitely retain his place and all that. Cantwell, Dowell and Lawrence can go. I don't think we've seen the best of Dowell. I think there is a bit of a player in there, but I just don't think it's working. Lawrence has been hampered by injuries and stuff like that, but again, whilst he is a good player, I don't think we'll see the best of it. The Hadji one's interesting. I have to admit, I think if we can engineer a decent fee, I don't mind Yanis Hadji being sold.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's the thing that I'd put on the boat.
Yeah. How are we looking in the comments, Craig? Is Tommy still getting it tight?
No, I think Tommy's been forgiven for this one. Everyone's pretty much in agreement about Cantwell. Hugstar 0809 says Cantwell's a good player, but his attitude seems a bit suspect. We need players to put the team before themselves. Southpaw Grammar says Cantwell is one of the few players with genuine class. Imagine him with better players around him. And CGM 55, I think, comes back to one of the points you made earlier. How many goals did they get? 5 or 6? They, I assume Celtic, have a midfielder who got 16 in terms of Matt O'Reilly. I think that's where we need players to step up, and we need players to make a real difference. Tommy spoke about Lawrence, Dowell, Hadji. I would, if you can get money for them at all, you'd let them go this summer, because actually none of the 3 of them are good enough for that position, and we need to find someone new to come in and take control and compete with Todd Cantwell or support Todd Cantwell in that position. And for me, that's a real area for focus this summer. And I'd let all of Lawrence, Hadji, and Dowell go this summer.
In the same breath there, Craig, as Hadji, he's went out on loan. It's maybe not worked out the way that he should, but he'll still carry some sort of fee and a bit of value. Another guy that fits in that bracket, Sam Lammers, okay, has maybe had the best loan spell that I can remember, leaving Rangers, going elsewhere and doing very, very well in comparison to what he done here. Would you be of the opinion of giving Lammers a second chance, or would you be looking at, right, here's a chance to get a potential fee that could benefit the squad in a time where we really need it?
You take the money and run. You absolutely take the money and run from Sam Lammers. I have no doubt that Sam Lammers is a good player. From what we've seen at the start of the season, though, he's not for Rangers. He's not set up for whether it's our style, whether he actually needed to play as a number 9 to get the goals that we've seen him get across in Holland since he's went across there. I'm not sure, but I don't think he'll never be the Rangers number 9, and I can't imagine any manager putting their trust in him to do that either, because turkeys don't vote for Christmas at the end of the day, and they want to keep their job, and why risk it on a player like that? So I think Sam Lammers has done really well. You can obviously tell there's a player in there. You can tell that he has a technical ability, and his technical ability was actually really good, but it was just until it came to shooting. It was until he had to take a shot, and then you were like, how have you missed like half of these chances? Like, it's one of those ones where as a fan you're thinking I could score 4 or 5 of those. So I think Sam Lammers, you take your money and run.
Yeah, the problem lay with him was the thing that he gets paid handsomely to do that he couldn't do, but he has seemed to been able to do it abroad over there. And Tommy, before I touch on Lammers as well, you kind of group them together. I don't know why it's been this way. I think it's just because they were signed at the same time. Dessers as well, in that sense. Cyril Dessers has put up real numbers since Clement came on board. I think he has started to completely split opinion amongst the support, whereas it was very lopsided before he came in that he should go. Now, given that Dessers is coming into his 30s, he has very good figures against his name. There's going to be competition in his position next season. Would you see this as an opportunity to move Dessers on, or would you like to see him stick around next season?
No, he definitely falls into one of those ones. If an offer arrives that's relatively decent, you sell him. I know people make the argument about the numbers. It's fair, right? His numbers are actually pretty decent. I would go back to the conversion rate though, and the fact that in the big moments in the big games, he's been found pretty lacking actually. So if you're stuck with him and he's here next season, because I do like his work ethic and I like the way he's, and some of the interviews are good as well and all that, right? If he's not the main striker, I'm a lot more comfortable. But for me, he's not our number 9 leading the line. So if he's in around the squad and we've got Danilo back, maybe bring in somebody else, okay, I can live with that. What I wouldn't want to be is next season where he is Rangers number 9 starting, and that's where we are. So yeah, I'd sell him if the money's right. But I can live with him being in the squad as long as he's not the main character.
Okay, hypothetical.
I think I saw something relevant on the youth talking about main character syndrome, and I managed to get that into the pod. I feel younger already being part of the up-to-date chat.
Well done. Do you like the PlayStation? I like the PlayStation. One of the ones, Tommy.
It's as good as it gets for me, mate. It's as good as it gets for me. By the way, just because I'm keeping my eye on it, JK27, I'm not saying keep him because of his interviews. You need to listen to what I'm saying, right? I'm saying he comes across quite well, and I like the fact that his attitude is he keeps going and wants to do really well for the club, right? I've also just been very clear there that to keep him, it would be as part of the squad. Remembering, if you can't get a decent offer and you're bringing in other players, you do have to have more than one striker. Right, and this is a guy who can do numbers for you in the domestic arena. So there's nothing wrong with being able to say that. Again, I think it's just being very clear that some players that are in the squad right now that we don't like, you might have to live with again next season and get a tune out of them. Because I don't think we can turn over the entire squad. Right, so just to be really clear, not want to keep him because of his interviews. Being also really clear that he's done some numbers. If a decent offer came in, yes, I would happily see him going out because I've never been of the opinion that he's a number 9 striker or he's at the elite level for us. But if he's still here, I'd be comfortable if it's the fact that he's not leading the line and he's a backup striker. So hopefully that clarifies that point.
Yeah, so We got a comment there on Dessers. He's always available, never hides, and number two, no problem. I agree with that. With Paul in the comments there, and I think it pretty much backs up what Tommy's saying there. Hypothetical world here, Craig. Lammers and Dessers. Say we get a fee in for at least one of them. Abdallah Sima, arguably one of your best players this season, put up decent numbers, was a threat every time he played. Would you look to put a fee that we would get in for one of these strikers towards keeping Abdallah Sima at Ibrox?
I like Abdallah Sima. I'm on the fence about whether we pay the money to keep him. If it's still the £7 million figure, that's pretty high, I think, for what we got from him, given his availability in terms of injury and things like that through the season. I'd have question marks over paying that amount of money for him. If you manage to get it down to somewhere between 4 and 5, I think you've got more of a discussion there. I would probably pay the money if it's between 4 and 5. If it's at £7 million, I wouldn't. I think Abdallah Sima offers us so much this season that we didn't have anyone else that did that. His power, his pace, his desire to get into the back post and score a goal was tremendous. And I'm a huge Abdallah Sima fan. It's whether we can get someone better than Abdallah Sima for that same amount of money. And actually, I would be pretty confident that you'd be able to get someone at least of equivalent, performance levels for less or for slightly less. So I think based on that, if it's £7 million, I wouldn't keep Abdallah Sima, but I am a big fan of him.
Okay. And on what Craig said there, talking about the fee there, Tommy, we've spoke about players staying unless a fee comes in. In Abdallah Sima's terms, the flip side of that would be how much would be too much for him to not stick around, if you know what I mean. How much would be too much for us to pay for Abdallah Sima not to want him here?
Well, we start with that 7 million number and work your way down, because 7's too much. And I don't see spending a chunk on that on a guy who does have a bit of a patchy injury cycle as well. I think somewhere on the 4 region, if there's a sell-on clause as well for Brighton and all that. I mean, I think he's only got a year left in his contract. Somebody might be able to point that out to me if that's incorrect. And I know Brighton had high hopes for him, and the price was higher at one point, but it seems to have kind of dropped down. I think if it's any more than 4, then yeah, you probably move on and see if there's something else that you can get at the same price point. Beyond that, yeah, I think everybody likes him. I think he did a decent job. We all see that there's potential there, but that's probably it.
Yeah, and in terms of that sort of left mid role that he occupied, we've seen Matondo in flashes. We've seen Scott Wright. I think a lot of Rangers fans wouldn't like to see him again, given the last game that he played. Matondo and Wright, Tommy, I'll stick with you with this one. Would you happily see them here next year, or have you just had enough of what you've seen that they should both be moved on?
See, I need to admit, and having brought the listeners back with me now, I'm about to get thrown back under the bus when I say I was always a Matondo fan, and I think there is something there, but it's not worked. So Matondo and Wright, thanks very much for your time and your service. If we can find any sort of fees for them, then they go. Obviously, you need to look at particularly the right thing. You need to look at the national quota, the kind of Scottish quota and stuff like that. But I thank Matondo for his goal in the Old Firm, because it was a cracker. But him and Wright can leave together.
Kyran, I think that's where Cortez comes in. I think that's Cortez is your natural replacement there. And I think it's a real shame that he got injured when he did, because he had a really positive start, probably the most positive start I've seen for a young player at Rangers for quite a while. His goal against Hearts was tremendous at Ibrox, and I felt like he was exactly what we were missing in that left-hand side. His deal probably, it sounds like we are speaking to Lawns about him and stuff like that. They want to recoup their money, about the £4 million mark. It seems to be the question mark is £4 million too much for a player we've seen 200 minutes of, or something along those kind of lines? Is that too much for a player, or do you buy him on the promise that he will continue to build that, and he's going to get better, and he's going to get to the player we believe he's going to be. I really liked him as a player. It's just that, again, it all comes down to the transfer fee, and if you feel it's worth it, I couldn't judge either way, but I liked him as a player.
I think the structure of that deal has got to be one that's smart in terms of, I think it's got to be a loan with the obligation, given that he makes X amount of performances. I believe that we paid a loan fee up front, and it was probably on the promise that he does make a certain amount of appearances, which hasn't happened, and it's probably brought both parties back to the table. And I'd be delighted to see him around. It looks like we've seen enough of him to really think that he can become a player, but enough to know that there's a lot more to come from him. And again, it comes back to, is he going to be injury prone? We really don't know. It's a bit of a grey area.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's no appetite at the club to take a gamble. I mean, we've been severely hampered and bitten by buying players who have got injury histories and then it cropping up and then consistent injuries as well. So the only way that the Cortez thing works is either, or the two ways that it works is either, as you say, a loan with an obligation so we can get to see him again or whatever that looks like, or a reduced fee, because it's a pretty serious injury he's coming off the back of. And for, a winger and stuff, well, for any player, but particularly, twist, turn, all that type of good stuff, it's a real gamble. And like I said, we have a history of gambling and losing with those types of things. And so, the club need to be very, very strong on what it is. And if it doesn't work and loans don't want to budge, then it's a question of, right, do we move on to the next target? Because I think most people, whilst they like Cortez and stuff like that, would probably say, if we're being forced to spend 4 or whatever it is up front and there's no movement because of the injury, do we want to take that chance?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you there. And we're coming to the end of the show, guys. I can only thank you enough, Craig, Tommy, on my hosting debut for this season.
I'll leave that to the comments to say whether you should be shipped out in the pre-season or not. That's entirely the listeners' job. I think
given the evidence of the comments so far, Tommy, you're public enemy number 1, so I'll leave that to you, mate.
I will not be back next time, is essentially what's happened to you.
You've redeemed yourself like Dessers, but no. Thank you very much to everyone who's tuned in, who's commented. I touched on it halfway through the show. The competition we've got over on our X account at This Is Ibrox. We're giving away the brand new away top that's just been released this week. Give it a like, give it a retweet, and subscribe to us down below. And please remember to tune in every Sunday. We've got a show coming up on Wednesday, guys. Am I correct in saying that this week?
I don't think so. I think it'll be next Sunday. We're taking a bit of a lighter schedule as we're in this period, give people a little bit of a break from our faces and our chat. So it'll be next Sunday again for a pod.
No problem. But as I said, thanks again everyone that tuned in. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Goodbye.